In the lexicon of modern warfare, there is a fundamental axiom: amateurs study tactics while professionals study logistics. No matter how formidable an army appears on paper, its operational survival dictates that it must be fed. It requires a constant, uninterrupted torrent of ammunition, spare parts, and above all, fuel. Without these arteries, the most advanced main battle tanks become multi-million-dollar paperweights, and thousands of elite troops turn into static targets. For the Russian armed forces garrisoned in the occupied Crimean peninsula, estimated to number between 40,000 and 60,000 personnel, this logistical nightmare is no longer a theoretical scenario. It is a rapidly unfolding catastrophe. On June 7th, the fragile logistical equilibrium maintaining Russia's southern front collapsed. A coordinated, multi-layered Ukrainian strike operation severed the primary ground artery feeding Crimea, the Chongar Bridge. With the Kerch Strait Bridge already structurally crippled and heavily restricted, tens of thousands of Russian troops are now effectively trapped inside a tightening logistical vice. Today we dive deep into the military operational mechanics behind Ukraine's systematic campaign to transform the Crimean Peninsula from an unsinkable aircraft carrier into history's largest logistics trap. To understand the gravity of the current crisis, we must look at the geography of the theater. Crimea is connected to mainland Ukraine by an incredibly narrow bottleneck. Historically, invading or defending this peninsula has always come down to controlling a few critical choke points. For Russia, sustaining its forces in Crimea and the southern Zaporizhzhia and Kherson fronts relied on two primary vectors. First, the Kerch Strait Bridge, a massive structural achievement connecting Crimea directly to the Russian mainland. However, after catastrophic Ukrainian operations in late 2022 and mid-2023, the Kerch Bridge has been structurally compromised. Its capability to sustain heavy military rail and vehicle traffic has been severely degraded. This forced the Kremlin to rely almost exclusively on the second vector, the 630-kilometer land corridor running through southern Ukraine, anchored by the R280 highway. But this corridor has a fatal flaw. The primary entry point from the mainland into northeastern Crimea depends heavily on a single piece of infrastructure, the Chongar Bridge spanning the marshy waters of the Sivesh Lake. On the night of June 7th, Ukraine's Special Operations Forces deployed a swarm of indigenous medium-range kamikaze drones. According to Russian occupation officials, including Kherson's Moscow-appointed governor, Vladimir Saldo, the strike was calculated with surgical precision. The objective was not the total demolition of the bridge's concrete pillars, an engineering feat requiring massive ordnance, but rather operational paralysis. By riddling the bridge deck with deep, overlapping craters, the strike effectively rendered the asphalt impassable for heavy military supply convoys. Instantly, the Jankoy checkpoint was shuttered, forcing Russian logistics officers into emergency diversion protocols. In military doctrine, closing a primary supply route triggers an immediate domino effect. With the Chongar Bridge offline, Russian supply convoys are forced to divert to alternative crossings further west, Armyansk and Perekop. From a tactical perspective, this creates three critical vulnerabilities for the Russian armed forces. First, it adds an extra 50 to 150 kilometers to the logistics loop. In military transport, distance equals time. A convoy that previously took a direct route must now navigate narrower secondary roads. During a matching closure in 2023, transport delays surged by over 50%. Second, it dramatically increases fuel consumption. In a supreme irony, Russian logistics units must expend thousands of additional gallons of scarce fuel simply to transport fuel and ammunition to the front line. Third, and most importantly, these alternative Western routes push Russian convoys significantly closer to the active front line in the Kherson region. This brings them directly into the engagement envelope of Ukrainian FPV drones, precision artillery, and reconnaissance assets. The R280 highway has effectively transformed into a highway of death. Open-source intelligence groups have documented a catastrophic attrition rate. Throughout May alone, Ukrainian long-range strike UAVs operating 200 to 300 kilometers behind the lines destroyed upwards of 125 Russian fuel tankers and heavy supply trucks. By cutting Chongar, Ukraine has funneled the remaining Russian transport assets into a highly predictable, highly lethal kill zone. The strike on the Chongar Bridge was not an isolated incident. It was the catalyst of a highly coordinated, three-layered operational doctrine designed to induce systemic shock within the Russian rear. On the exact same night the bridge was struck, Ukrainian long-range strike elements executed a synchronized assault targeting Russia's strategic backup infrastructure deep within the peninsula. Layer 1 was the interdiction of transport, the Chongar Bridge. Layer 2 was the destruction of regional distribution hubs. Ukrainian forces struck the Semikholodiaznoye fuel depot near Lenino. Situated roughly 200 kilometers from the active front, this Soviet-era facility had been completely overhauled by Russia after the 2014 annexation to serve as a vital railway-to-truck fuel transfer station. NASA firm's satellite imagery confirmed massive thermal signatures as the facility's reservoirs erupted into uncontrollable blazes. Layer 3 targeted Russia's ultimate strategic reserves. Simultaneously, a drone swarm penetrated the heavily defended airspace of Feodosia, striking the naval petroleum terminal. This is Crimea's largest fuel storage complex, capable of holding up to 250,000 tons of petroleum products. It served as the Kremlin's emergency reserve, meant to sustain the Black Sea Fleet and the garrison if mainland supply lines failed. By striking the road where the fuel travels, the depots where it is distributed, and the strategic terminal where it is reserved, Ukraine achieved total operational synchronization. They cut the supply, destroyed the storage, and starved the user, all in a single evening. For the military, this fuel starvation triggers a vicious operational cycle, most visible in Russia's air defense umbrella. Advanced anti-aircraft systems, such as the S-400 Triumph and Panzer S-1 units guarding Crimean airspace, rely on high-power, continuously operating radar arrays. When the fixed electrical grid is disrupted or targeted, these mobile systems must deploy heavy diesel generators. As fuel lines dry up, commanders face an impossible dilemma: run the radars continuously and exhaust their remaining diesel, or ration radar operating hours. Choosing the latter opens massive gaps in the early warning network. This allows even more Ukrainian strike drones to penetrate deep into the peninsula, hitting more depots, destroying more convoys, and further worsening the fuel deficit. It is a textbook logistical death spiral. Ukraine's ultimate strategic objective here is not a bloody high-casualty amphibious or ground invasion of the peninsula. Rather, it is operational starvation. By systematically eroding every bridge, rail junction, fuel depot, and harbor, Ukraine is making Crimea entirely untenable as a military staging ground. Every single day that Russia chooses to maintain its 60,000-strong garrison in Crimea, it must pump an astronomical amount of dwindling resources down a highly hazardous, collapsing logistical corridor. Every gallon of fuel, every crate of artillery shells, and every replacement vehicle sent to keep the Crimean garrison alive is a resource stolen from the desperate Russian defensive lines in Zaporizhzhia or the offensive axes in the Donbas. Crimea has ceased to be a strategic military asset for the Russian Federation. It has become a massive, bleeding strategic liability. Bridges are indeed the invisible front lines of modern war. And right now, Russia is losing that front line. As the land corridor narrows and the smoke rises from the fuel terminals of Feodosia, the 60,000 troops trapped in the peninsula face an uncertain, grueling future. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the military mechanics of the war in Ukraine. If you want to stay up to date with deep tactical and operational analyses just like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us next time. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Can Russia hold Crimea under total logistical isolation? Until next time out.